high school, I went to school in Sydney, and I went to Northingham Grammar School, which is on the very border of Sydney up north. My favourite subject, I would say, would be science and biology, though at the time I didn't plan on being a scientist, but I really enjoyed understanding how things worked. And so I tended to go to lessons with quite a bit of interest. I'm a PhD student at the University of Adelaide and University of Nottingham, which means that I'm quite lucky to get to go to both universities in both Australia and the UK. And I'm a food scientist by training. I went to university to do my undergrad at UNSW in Sydney before coming over to Adelaide for the PhD. And my PhD in particular is looking at edible insects. So I'm looking to better describe the flavour of edible insects. And then by understanding that, we're also looking to understand what impact better understanding flavour might have on how we perceive insects as food. So whether if we have a better understanding of what something tastes like, it might help us feel more comfortable with eating it or how to use it in our everyday diet. Well, a typical day for me varies depending on what I'm working on. So within my research, I work on everything from insect rearing through to sensory science, which is the science of our senses and how they interact with what we eat. So on one day, I might be rearing insects, and on another day, I might have 50 to 100 people coming through a sensory lab, and I'll be giving them food samples in a controlled scenario. So it really varies, but on an average day, I'll typically come into the office and get a bit of work done in terms of admin. I might do a bit of writing or reading, and then I might do a bit of lab work. And that could be rearing insects, or it could be in the sensory lab, or sometimes looking at nutritional analysis in a chemistry lab too. So there's a lot of variation on a day-to-day basis, which definitely keeps you on your toes. So my research is quite embedded in agriculture and the food industry. So one of the reasons we're looking at insects in particular as food is the fact that they can efficiently convert agriculture and food industry waste into some really good quality food ingredients. So in terms of my research itself, I work on everything from insect rearing and understanding what impact what insects eat has on their flavour, as an example, which would sit very closely within insect agriculture in Australia. But I also work on the other side of agriculture, so looking at how we use those early products in food products and how they're perceived and used by consumers. Technology plays a big role in my everyday. As an example, when I'm writing, when I'm researching, I'll be sitting on a computer, I'll be using the internet, so very basic technology. But on the other hand, when I'm working in a lab, as an example, I'm using a lot of instruments that have really changed the way we research. So everything from, as an example, logging temperature through to being able to separate flavour compounds within food and analysing their concentration. So it's a really important part of my everyday. Well, I definitely didn't expect to be where I am today. I think when I was younger, I knew I loved food, I loved science, but I didn't quite expect myself to become a scientist. So I think every day I surprise myself, and that's quite a nice way to live, I think. Useful skill for my role would have to be people skills. I think often when we think about science and research, we think about the nitty-gritty technical aspect of that. But the reality is that you need to work with people on an everyday basis. That helps you learn and grow as an individual, researcher, and within your career. But it also helps you manage your day-to-day. So whether you're accessing facilities or looking to use certain instruments, you need to be able to work with people to do that. So it's a really important aspect of your growth to prioritise. I think one of the main challenges for those looking to go into a career in research would be the fact that every day is a little bit challenging. You will often get things wrong, and being able to manage making mistakes and learning from them can be really hard. So, ensuring that on a day to day basis, you're accepting that you make mistakes, making sure you learn from them, and giving yourself a pat on the back is hard but an important lesson. When I go to work, I tend to wear closed-toed shoes. Typically, that's a requirement for our office and when you're working in the lab, but I like to have a bit of color on them too. So, some sort of shoes with a bit of color tends to be my go to pick.